The emperor was so severe as regards to personal morality that he frequently sent to the front young men who had been sufficiently attentive to some married women to run the risk of disturbing their married life. He was especially jealous of the reputation of the court ladies and of the wives of his generals, but his efforts to protect them frequently did the reverse, for people would openly discuss the reasons for these sudden departures, and it was even said that he caused them for reasons of his own, gossip that was never true. He merely sought to frighten the women who might for an instant have thought of forgetting her duties. Once he said to me, "I am sure young men never dare to look at you. They are afraid of me." This idea amused him. It was on purpose that the emperor wished his court to be severe rather than entertaining. One day when the Queen of Naples was telling my mother, the Empress, about an evening she had spent at a masked ball and all the witty things that she had said there, the emperor interrupted her impatiently, saying, "Once upon a time, all that was amusing enough. It is not any more. A princess must set an example and behave in accordance with the rules of her day. The time for light and frivolous amusement has passed. Everything now must be serious and severe." Yet he would occasionally be quite merry when alone with us. This was true particularly in the days when my mother was with him. On such occasions he whispered all sort of remarks into her ear, and if he thought I might have overheard them and feel embarrassed, he would laugh till tears came to his eyes. Once, for instance, when my mother was present, he was telling me about his former success with the ladies, adding, "I never found a single one who resisted me." "That was probably because you never tried one who was in the habit of resisting." He began to laugh, pinched my ear till I could have cried, and said to my mother, "Listen to what your daughter is saying about me. She thinks I have always been old." I have always seen him more reserved with his new wife, but also more gentle and more anxious to please. He frequently urged her to enjoy the pleasures of her age. "If you would like to dance," he said, "send for the music. Go and watch the masked balls. Visit the public buildings and state factories." "No," replied the Empress, "not unless you go with me." "But I have no time. Go with Hortense. The Parisians will be glad to catch a glimpse of you." "No, I would rather stay here." And that would be the end of the matter. If she kept him waiting for dinner, he would greet her with the words, "Ah, I see you've been making yourself beautiful." Yet often he had been greatly displeased with my mother for an equally unimportant matter. One day, at one of the great receptions when we were wearing all our diamonds, after he had complimented us on our appearance, the emperor caught sight of himself in the mirror, and looking at his simple uniform of the guard, said as he turned away, "One must be very vain to dress so simply." He charmed everyone who came near him when he gave way to his good nature. No one who saw him in those moods would have guessed he was the man before whom all Europe trembled, and whose greatness of mind impressed us as much as it did any other members of his court. He never appeared otherwise than grave in public. People imitated him, and wherever he appeared, he became the center of attention. Everyone hoped he would speak to him, and I have seen men at receptions given by the Empress decline to sit at a card table with young and pretty women and remain standing in the hope that the emperor, who sometimes liked to chat with those who were in the drawing room, doing nothing, might speak to them. When the emperor felt like talking, there was not a subject on which he did not have something original to say. He never feared to utter his political views. Once, when surrounded by a number of persons attached to the court, he said, "I never thought of replacing the Bourbons on the throne. They would not have been able to make France happy for two reasons: because the nation has harmed them too much ever to trust them, and because they would never have been able to satisfy the claims of those they brought back with them. A new man was necessary, a man not contaminated by the excesses of the revolution, who could unite all parties and who was strong enough to stabilize all the advantages the revolution had won. I believe that there never was a court where morals were as pure as that of the emperor, yet few courts ever have been as much condemned." This is easily explained. On the one hand, there were a few Republicans who, angry at the brilliant positions which some of their former associates had achieved, sought sarcastically to assail the circles to which they had not been promoted. On the other were the former nobles, delighted at the revival of the traditional court etiquette, but at the same time remaining disdainful of the newer nobility and somewhat jealous of its laurels. As courtiers of the old regime, they were obliged to find excuses for the pleasure they took in the splendor of the new court. When they went back to see their old relatives who had remained faithful to the old regime, they criticized and made fun of the present conditions, seeking, at the price of a few witticisms, to secure forgiveness for their weakness and aspiring to share the new honors. How many efforts to secure a position people explained by saying, "It was forced upon me." As Monsieur de Talleyrand put it, "I have a list of people who want to be forced." The police system directed by the Duc de Rovigo also did a great deal to harm to the court ladies. His predecessor, Fouché, only harmed the emperor when he obliged the latter to exile certain persons of the Faubourg Saint-Germain from Paris. Whenever a complaint was made to Fouché, he would pretend to know nothing about it, blaming it on the emperor's impetuous temperament, on the fact that there were 100 other branches of the police department which he could not superintend. In the end, he would promise to wait for a favorable moment and have the sentence of banishment lifted. Later, it was true, he would request the emperor to rescind the order which he had himself asked for, thus giving himself all the credit and letting his master take all the blame. He thus made followers for himself, but he never bothered about drawing room gossip or petty social intrigues. The Duc de Rovigo, on the other hand, seemed to do nothing else than collect the slightest bits of information about everyone's private life. He acted as his own detective, wished to be the confidant of the ladies, stirred up quarrels between them, told stories which might or might not be true, spent all his mornings making visits from one to another. If, in the Bois de Boulogne, a woman surrounded by her children and her friends happened to be speaking to a man and caught sight of the Duc de Rovigo, she felt her reputation was lost. All our ladies did their best to avoid him. They declared he compromised them on purpose in order to make people forget about the person to whom he was attached and toward whom society was distinctly hostile. The Duc de Rovigo may have been brave, witty, devoted to his master, and had other qualities besides, but only the most firmly rooted virtue can withstand the contact with that mass of corruption, the police department. What excuse has one to assume the right to pry into the secrets of others? And what can one respect if one does not respect the sanctity of family life? If it is necessary for the good of the state to carry on such investigations to a certain point, then the high morals of the man who does so should reassure the public as to the purity of his intentions. His character should offer society a guarantee for the power it bestows upon him. It was for these reasons that the emperor, when he appointed Monsieur de Lavalette director of the post office, said to him, "I give you this post because you are the most honest man I know." Nor did Monsieur de Lavalette ever cause the slightest uneasiness. Savary, although he was admired as the emperor's aide-de-camp, did not meet with the same favor as cabinet minister. It was natural enough that the emperor should wish to know what was going on at his court, and especially what the members of his family were doing. But the minister had no right to inform others regarding his suspicions or his discoveries. I personally never had any reason to complain of him. On the contrary, he only showed me consideration and esteem. But he did not like the emperor's sisters, and he did them a vast amount of harm by relating 1,000 stories, true or false, about their home life, to which no one could witness, but which everyone afterwards repeated. I persist in saying, therefore, that in spite of all the libels it was made, the object of no court has ever been more moral or more strict than that of the emperor. Many receptions were held. Besides the 2 formal gatherings in the state apartments, there was twice a week either a play or a concert given by the empress in her apartment on a little stage. The fact that the most distinguished artists were present did not change the chilly and stilted atmosphere. The entertainment became so formal that it lost all gaiety. At my mother's house, on the contrary, in her exile at Malmaison, everything was gracious and pleasant. Dignity did not prevent enjoyment. The young and talented ladies whom she had gathered about her, in addition to her ladies in waiting, made the evenings delightful. People were glad to attend in spite of her living out of town and having no more favors to bestow. The manners of the gentlemen of that day, although not as gracious or as flattering as they are said to have been in earlier times, had unquestionably improved since the establishment of the empire. Men were simple, sincere, and polite. In the early days of the consulate, I had seen young Republicans holding their heads very high, apparently unwilling to admit that anyone could be their superior. Since then, I have seen young nobles who gave themselves disdainful airs, apparently unwilling to admit that anyone could be their equal. Both in time modified their attitude and improved by doing so. According to the criticisms of those who are not received, there no court can exist without flatterers and sycophants. It is in the fashion to apply these terms to all those who belong to a court. I can imagine that under some feeble king, everyone may seek to make himself the favorite and can do so by committing some base action. I can also admit that under a powerful king, the man who obtains the sovereign's favor may deserve the epithet of courtier in a derogatory sense, if the desire for advancement makes him prefer flattery to plain speaking. But a palace where well-brought-up people meet, it is not different from any private residence, except that in the former there exist traditional rules of conduct which guide one's behavior, whereas in the latter one follows the taste and inclination of the lady of the house. How many young men there are who fear of the ridicule associated with the term courtling, adopt a distant tone, an insolent manner, and an air of despising those about them. If they are clever, this weakness does not last long. They themselves become aware that their attitude is not to their advantage, and they adopt those manners they once sought to avoid, and become in their turn courtiers in all that word implies in the way of courtesy and politeness. One must be fair and admit that in society the things which are attractive in consideration for women, kindliness towards all, delicate thoughtfulness for others, polished manner of speech, correctness of dress, and especially those expressions of respect which can so easily be uttered and which are so agreeable to hear. I know that corruption may be hidden away behind all this, but at least it is pleasant to meet at every step what appears to be virtue. Moreover, what better tribute can you pay to virtue than to seek to wear its colors in order to charm? Why does not the inner self correspond to this brilliant exterior? Because the latter too often is a cloak beneath which the adventurer hides his maneuvers. As for flattery, that fault which is so often attributed to courtiers, no one need be ashamed of it. What greater flatterer is there than a king? How many times he says without meaning it, I depend on your devotion to my cause. I place my honor in your hands. If he hears praise addressed to him, does he in turn not give it to others? To be sure, this is of no importance in one case or the other. It is merely a conventional form of speech which deceives no one. If I appear to be defending here the manners one finds at court, I nevertheless think one should wish a noble sincerity to be admired in all ranks of society. About this time, I made my appearance at Écouen as Princess Protectrice of the school. The institution was the result of a fine moment of enthusiasm on the part of the emperor. The day after the Battle of Austerlitz, touched by the loss of so many brave men whose death had added to his own glory, he decreed, while still on the field of battle, that he was prepared to adopt the children of all those who had lost their lives on that famous occasion. On his return, while he was still hesitating as to how to put his decree into effect on account of his opinion that girls should be brought up by their mothers, he sent for Madame Campan, consulted her, and finally said, I shall not limit myself to provide an education for a small number of girls. I do not like little things. They are of no value. Saint-Cyr was only a flower garland which the love of Louis XIV offered Madame de Maintenon. 250 daughters of nobles were nothing compared to 8,000 families of poor gentlefolk. I shall educate 400 or 500 girls, or none at all, and I shall reform public morals. The execution of this plan was postponed, but after the Battle of Friedland, he wrote with his own hand and drew up a very complete set of instructions, which have ever since been strictly observed in this institution. My reception at Écouen was a touching one. I was happy every time I visited this place where so many young hearts were brought up to love me, and where I gained experience the emotions of my childhood, and that lightheartedness, that confidence in others which life too quickly effaces. The establishment was far superior to Saint-Cyr. It is true that Madame Campan devoted all her remarkable talents to its success. I had a road made connecting Saint-Leu and Écouen in order to go there as often as my health permitted. The school at Saint-Denis was also organized, as well as 6 other schools for orphan girls, where no mere social accomplishments were taught, but where the pupils learned things only of practical value. I had all these institutions under my protection. It was as if I were the mother of all the girls in France. In their prayers, my name and that of the emperor were the only 2 specially mentioned. Consequently, people were jealous of me. The empress was frequently told it was she who should have this position. Indeed, she even came to wish that she did have it, but the emperor always kept it for me. For her, he had organized a Mother's Aid Society, and Madame Mère was placed at the head of all the French Sisters of Charity. Thus it was to his family that the emperor confided the care of the young and the unfortunate.